Hey, Steve.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning.
Rabbi, I'm really enjoying this class a lot.
Well, good. Hopefully you're going to feel the same way after class today.
Well,
Boker
I should
Tov,
have.
Boker Tov, I'll be
Tov.
there in a moment.
Okay.
Hey, Rabbi,
Yes.
I cannot get you on my computer. I cannot get you on my cell phone. We're on Jerry's computer now. This is every single week. Do you have any idea?
Do you use Lisa Unsell's link?
Yes, yes, that's how Jerry got in. I just
Hmm.
can't get it anymore.
Maybe you need to upload a new copy of Zoom or something.
Oh,
And be nice to Jerry in the meantime.
Yeah.
Do you have the same problem with other Zoom links or just this one?
no, only this one. This is the only one.
Okay. So I'm going to suggest that you team up with Jennifer at some time that's convenient for the both of you
Yeah,
and see if you can resolve this problem.
yeah, okay. I shall ask her when she will be available because it's just irritating. Jerry, you don't have a camera on your computer?
I do, I just have it off.
How do you, oh, there's start video.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well,
Good morning.
there you are. Look. See?
Yeah,
Problem
not used
fixed.
used to being in this room. Good
Right.
morning, Marcia.
See, I can
Hello,
see
how
you. You
are
can
you?
see me. Yes.
Yeah, all is
Okay.
well.
Well, if we can see each other, that's half the problems of the world solved.
Yes.
But this is on my computer, not hers. We usually do it on
Well,
hers.
I can't deal with everything.
I know.
So I'll talk to Lisa because she's really bizarre.
Is she on this?
Jennifer is on this call, and hopefully Jennifer can help you diagnose the problem and fix it.
Okay.
I'm happy to help you do that, Ronnie.
Thank you, because it's
Eight
just
times out of
frustrating.
10, 8 times out of 10, if you turn your computer off and restart it again.
But I did it on my cell phone too, and I couldn't get it on my cell phone.
Do you have the password?
No,
but
I clicked on the link and the screen is just blank.
Rabbi,
Yes,
Rabbi?
Daniel.
So we're on the subject of technical issues. Do you mind leaning your camera back ever so slightly so we can see above
You
your
want to
eyes?
see the top of my head? Is that it?
It would bring peace to my universe. I
He
don't want
wants
to
to,
be.
he wants to make sure you're wearing a kippah.
That's really it, Stephen. Yes.
Yeah.
If it makes it difficult for you to see your screen, I don't want to be a control freak, but it would be nice to be able to
Is that
see.
better?
Ah,
I like that. Thank you.
that's actually
Oh,
better.
there you
All
are.
right. And if
I think this is
turn like that,
to the level of the sand.
then you can really see the source of my wisdom, or something. So we are in the middle of this unit on the value of procreation, and the basic question we're trying to deal with is, to what extent the value of procreation, and how does that compete with other values in Jewish
Oh.
life, in Jewish text, in Jewish history.
I need to get a little water.
And so we are going to start today going right back into the text and looking at what Maimonides has to say about this. And one of the things you have to understand about Maimonides is that his Judaism is an extremely intellectual form of Judaism. So when he looks at the mitzvah to procreate, what he sees is an obligation to create disciples who share a certain intellectual view. Okay? And this passage from the Mishnah Torah talks
from
about
Horwitz.
Maimonides permitting someone to remain a bachelor and therefore to postpone procreation if he wants to continue studying Torah full time. So again, procreation is living in tension with another Jewish value, which is the value of Torah study, of becoming a knowledgeable person in Torah. Let's see what he says. The mitzvah of being fruitful and multiplying is incumbent on the husband and not on his wife. Okay? That's pretty standard understanding of the rabbis. When does a man become obligated to fulfill this mitzvah? Well, back then it was a lot earlier than we would say today. From the time he reaches the age of 17. If he reaches now, and from 17 to 20, it's kind of a gray area. But if he reaches 20 and has not married, he is considered to have transgressed and negated the observance of this positive commandment. There are times when, you're not obligated to fulfill a positive commandment. You don't fulfill the commandment of eating matzah on Pesach on Rosh Hashanah, right? It only comes into play at certain times on the opening days of Passover. So 20 is the age where you're considered to be a transgressor if you don't fulfill this. If, however, he is occupied with the study of Torah and absorbed in this endeavor and is hesitant to marry, lest he be forced to work to support his wife and thus be prevented from studying Torah, he is permitted to delay marriage. For classic Jewish principle, osek b'mitzvah patur mina mitzvah, one who is occupied in the performance of one mitzvah is exempt from the obligation to perform another, and surely this applies with regard to Torah study. Okay? So here are conflicting values. So what does this say about the relation between education and procreation? Any reactions to this? Yes, Daniel.
I'm trying to find the passage here. I'm sorry, just a second. He is permitted to, for a person who is occupied in the performance of one mitzvah is exempt from the obligation to perform another.
Yes.
That doesn't say anything about how you weigh or balance or evaluate this mitzvah over this one. In other words, if I were, we've talked in other classes about saving life on Shabbat. Yes, you're commanded to save life and violate the Shabbat. But how would you, as a general rule, how would the rabbi sit down and go, this is a bigger mitzvah than this one?
Okay, that's a great question. And there isn't a simple answer for you. Sorry. There are certain mitzvot that are time bound that have to be done at certain times. Right? So, generally the rabbis will say, well, you may think you're doing another mitzvah, but you have this mitzvah coming up, which has to be fulfilled at a certain time. You can't say, well, I'm not going to have a Passover Seder this year because I'm involved in this study of Torah with a group of people that we meet every night, and it's an ongoing thing. And isn't Torah study a mitzvah? And we'll say, well, yeah, except this one precedes the other.
Well, he implies that studying Torah then is more important, at least for this first 3 years or 4 or 5, as opposed to procreating. How did he come up with that evaluation? Does he explain what logic he went through, why that one
Well,
was
he
more
doesn't
important?
explain that, and Maimonides usually doesn't give the reasons for his laws, but they're generally based on the discussion of those things in the Talmud. Now, another person, another sage might look at those same texts and come up with a different ruling, but that is generally what he bases himself on. Yes, Steve.
So I know
Thank you.
there's another story somewhere in our literature when a community can only build a house of worship or a house of study, the Beit Knesset or Beit HaMidrash is supposed to build the Beit HaMidrash, the house of study first. And this kind of, to me, indicates that education is could probably be a higher value than a lot of other things.
Yes, that's correct. Yes, Lou.
Does Maimonides in another section talk about when, if you delay marriage, how long you can delay it?
I don't know the answer to that. He may not. I've read a pretty good swath of the Mishnah Torah, but I can't say for sure that he does or doesn't deal with it elsewhere. Okay. But here, at least, we're dealing with a conflict between two important mitzvot, and Maimonides is trying to resolve that.
I have a comment
Please, Marcia.
that I was thinking when he was saying that the study of Torah takes a higher value than procreation. And if he married, then he would have to provide for his wife and family. And so is that what current Haredi do in terms of they're needing support from the state of Israel for, just support, I'm sure monetary support, because they're always in study. And, how does Israel decide how much a person needs or they have to
Mhm.
provide for this individual or group of individuals, because they're always studying?
Yeah.
I mean, it
So,
affects current policy.
when the state of Israel was founded, and how, let me explain kind of how that all came about. When the state of Israel was founded, obviously this was right after the Holocaust, and a number of religious leaders came to Ben Gurion as the first prime minister and said, we need to support Torah scholars because so many Torah scholars were killed. We have to, replenish the supply.
Mhm.
And so Ben Gurion asks, how many people are we talking about? And he says, a couple hundred, maybe 300, right?
Mhm.
And Ben Gurion, recognizing that there was some legitimacy to this request, said, we can do that, right? If Ben Gurion had realized that the enormity that this would grow into, where you would have tens of thousands of people being supported
Right.
on welfare so that they could sit and study Torah,
Right.
he would never have agreed to it. But eventually that is what it grew into, because, the Haredi families tended to be very large. And so, they just hopped aboard the system. And Maimonides himself was very opposed to this kind of thing. And I'm sure that if Ben Gurion had consulted other sages, they would have told him that Maimonides says this is not the ideal, that people should sit and study Torah and be supported by community funds, right? Or
Right.
what we would today call welfare,
Welfare.
right? Maimonides said, that's not the spiritual ideal we're looking for, because Pirkei Avot says that, you should Yafet Talmud Torah im derech eretz. You should combine the study of Torah with a normal life, with a normal occupation. Right?
Right.
So it grew into something much larger than anyone intended to support. And I think that even the leaders in the Haredi community have come to recognize that this is unsustainable. It's like, it's a Jewish Ponzi scheme, right? That you can't ultimately just, continue to support, generations and generations and enlarging generations of, people sitting and studying Torah and not contributing to the economy and not supporting families.
Yeah.
So they're beginning to deal with that. And it's a complicated problem, and it'll probably take a long time to wean them off, or wean, let's say, most of the Haredi men who live on the system away from it. Yes, Daniel.
Thank you.
Just as a note, to me, welfare is something that's used to balance an inequality in society. We give welfare to the widow and the orphan. This is not, this is paying somebody to do something that there is no market for, and somehow or another is providing a service to the whole population. And it's a really, well, that's all I've got to say. I mean, I use the term welfare too. I'm not criticizing that, your use of it, but this is hardly welfare.
No, it certainly not in the way that we have a positive connotation to welfare. I would add, by the way, that here in America, we have a similar problem that has been dealt with a different solution. There were, especially after the Second World War, many Jews who wanted simply to sit and study Torah, and there developed a whole community in Lakewood, New Jersey, of people which, started out as a few dozen and eventually became thousands of people.
I didn't know that.
Who basically were either supported by their wives or supported by their families or supported through an internal tzedakah system. And, so we had thousands of people in Lakewood and in the Lakewood area who sat and studied Torah, right? Eventually, that didn't work for everybody. And so there developed the idea of having a kollel, or, a small group of people studying Torah together in a variety of communities around the country. And sometimes people would be admitted to the kollel from outside Lakewood, sometimes not. They would have some teaching responsibilities in the community, which enabled them to get some income from within, and they had some income from without as well. So in Kansas City, we had the Kansas City Community Kollel, and that was just one of many different groups which were, if not directly connected with the Lakewood system, were at least spiritually related to it. I don't know how Torch here in Houston got started, but I don't think they're very different from other community kollels in that respect. Yes, Ronnie.
Okay, because here in Houston, we have Torch, but there's also a kollel. They're two separate entities. It is the kollel affiliated with the mother kollel in New Jersey. Do you know?
I don't know. I'm really not. I'm not on the inside,
Okay.
so I can't answer those questions.
The kollel here grew out of Torch.
Oh, grew out of Torch.
They
Oh,
didn't
oh.
come from there, but I'm not familiar if they associated later on, more recently.
Yeah, I think, yeah, the real question is, where did Torch grow out of?
Really, Torah and Masora, really the Wolfson family gave the seed money to start it here. They gave a declining amount of money over a couple of years. So here we'll fund you 90% of the beginning, and you start creating your own income. But it's really the Wolfson Family Foundation, who's done this in many other cities.
Okay.
Is Torch and Meyerland Minion affiliated somehow or another, or is that just my imagination?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, they're separate.
I don't think there's any relationship. I mean, it may be that some of the people who are in Torch attend Meyerland Minion. I don't think there's, any kind of formal relationship.
That's fine. I was just curious. I wasn't accusing them.
No, that's okay. You're welcome to offer any kinds of false accusations you wish. Okay. So let's go on to the next text. I see your comment, Daniel. I'm not going to comment on that.
No problem.
So here is here's our next text, and this is from Sylvia Barak-Fishman, a sociologist, and who has analyzed demographic trends of Jewish women over a long period of time, primarily from the 50s to the 90s, and deals with the issue of how Jewish families balance education and procreation. Jewish women may expect to have a lot of babies, but practicality can get in the way of that. They want to live up to a certain ideal of procreation as Jews, but getting an education often means starting families later. So you can think about this in relation to the text with Maimonides, who expresses a certain ideal, right? And who never imagined, of course, that women would also take on professions. She says the vast majority of Jewish women still place enormous value on having children. Jewish women are less likely than any other religious or ethnic group to state that they wish to remain childless. Most American Jewish couples hope to have children someday.
I'm sorry, Rabbi. Are you intending to share what you're reading? Because it's not showing.
I should be, but let me.
We're seeing just a normal picture.
Retread here. Okay, how's that?
That's better. Thank you.
Good. Thank you for reminding me to do my job properly here.
I thought you were sharing your personal thought here.
Yeah. Okay, so unlike women of other ethnic groups in which higher education is associated with lower expectations of childbearing, the more highly educated a Jewish woman, the more children she expects to have. So these other, the Goldscheiders, relying on data that deal with expected family size, point out that among Jewish populations, educational attainment is directly rather than inversely related to fertility expectations. Thus, Jews with doctorates expect 2.2 children, and only 11% expect to be childless. However, highly educated Jewish women do not actually have as many children as they once expected to. Although Jewish career women are more committed to having children than other groups of career women, they are at least as likely as other white middle-class women to postpone the onset of childbearing until they have reached what they consider to be an appropriate level of occupational or financial achievement. In this new demographic, expectations often do not give way to reality. Jewish women aged 16 to 26, interviewed in a national study in 1969-70, expected to have an average of 2.5 children. That same demographic cohort 20 years later has, in fact, born an average of 1.5 children, with a projected average completed family size of 1.7 children. Okay. So, first of all, why do Jewish women aspire and expect to have many children? Yeah, Lou?
Tradition.
It's tradition. Yeah, Steve? Yeah, thank you. All right, so obviously tradition
Peru,
is associated with other values, right?
isn't the first commandment in the Torah Peru or Vu?
Yeah, we did talk about that last week, right? But the question is, at what point? And for how many? Yes, Karen?
This article was written in 1942, is that right?
No, she was born in 1942.
Oh,
This was published in 2002, based on our work through the 90s.
so that's still almost 20 years old.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how that's changed.
Yes. My suspicion is it has not changed a great deal. Yes. Yes, please. You have to unmute yourself, dear. All right.
I think the reason why the numbers have changed is reality comes into play. That you anticipate that you want X amount of children, and when you start factoring in childcare and education and shoes and everything else that goes with having children, you reassess what you may have decided at a younger age.
Right. Reality throws up some barriers.
Yeah.
Or at least challenges that make it more difficult to accomplish that goal.
Right.
So you may have the goal and just and find that it's more difficult to get there than you thought.
Right.
And then, occasionally somebody comes along who wants to have 4 children and they find that they can't have any. Right? Okay. Other comments or questions before we go forward? Yes, Daniel.
I would be curious, I'll look it up myself, if they did similar surveys for men. And I was going to reiterate basically what Ronnie was saying, is that life gets in the way, but it's not just for children. I mean, these same women may have thought they all wanted to be proteges of RGB, or they wanted to be whatever, highly successful in their professions. Things change when you grow up, and our expectations from life sometimes get downsided. So I'm not sure that this one figure says much about reproduction per se. It's just one of the things that we have different expectations for.
Yeah, it simply illustrates a broad issue, right? Okay, let's go on to the next text from Rabbi Benjamin Lau. Okay. So this text is from about 2007, where he suggests that marriage itself can sometimes be in tension with procreation. And he's going to say childbearing can be delayed if that delay will increase the likelihood that the couple will ultimately marry, or that the delay can be used for better emotional bonding. Okay? So here is what he says. In our society, people are marrying at a later age, and we must do everything possible to help young people enter into marriage, recognizing that marriage is not just an instrument to facilitate bringing children into the world, but that it constitutes a value in and of itself, that it is not good for a person to be alone, that obligates the halachic authorities to exert themselves to encourage young people considering marriage. If leniency in the form of an allowance to delay the mitzvah of having children is likely to decide the issue in favor of a wedding, this should be given serious consideration. So does everybody understand what he means by this? In other words, if you allow people to say, okay, we're not going to have children right away after we get married, then at least they will be more likely to get married right away or sooner. Okay? Continuing. In contrast to the reasons that forbid a married man, as opposed to a bachelor, to delay the mitzvah of procreation, there are reasons to allow a couple to delay the fulfillment of the mitzvah for a limited period of time, provided that they translate their emotional attachment into a marital bond. Okay, so this says something interesting about the function of marriage, okay? Which, if all we talk about is procreation, 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 we're not necessarily talking about good marriage, good marriage, good marriage. Thoughts, comments, questions?
I don't understand it again. I mean, I'm sorry, but is he saying that you get married and you don't have kids because you want to focus on building the marriage? Is that what he's saying? I don't know that.
He's saying, okay, so let me illustrate it this way. A couple comes to me as a rabbi and they say, Rabbi, we're a pretty good couple. We want to get married, but we also don't want to have kids right away. Should we wait to get married, or, so that we can start having kids right after we get married? Or should we get married now and wait to have children? Right? If your value is on the side of procreation, well, how do you address that? Because people are not going to put the same weight on procreation that they did in the past, where they say, okay, We get married, we have babies. Because they don't have to.
Well, I don't mean this crudely, but they don't have to get married to enjoy a sexual relationship with each other either.
Oi, oi, oi.
No, I'm sorry, but that's
I know.
almost a cow in the an
That
elephant in the
is,
room.
that is also the reality that we are dealing with. And of course, the reality that a typical non-Orthodox rabbi faces today. You know, normally when people fill out the questionnaire, you know, when they come to the rabbi, say we want to get married, more often than not, I would say a lot more often than not, they list the same address. Right? So we know, Daniel, but we're aware. It's
I hesitated to bring it up.
no, that it's just a fact. It just
But,
is.
but all these rabbis for the last 2,000 years were writing in an environment where birth control didn't exist. So, I mean, it's a big reason why the laws change.
It certainly
Even
wasn't
today-
as effective.
Even today, they're not allowed to use it most of the time. The birth control. When you get married, you're expected to have relations until that nature. You get pregnant, it just happens.
Yes. And that's one reason why some people don't get married right away. Either because, you know, professional reasons, or they're not ready to feel they're not ready emotionally to have children. You know, whatever the reasons, yeah, people will delay having children. But the traditional value certainly was that they would get married and have children immediately. And we recognize that that's not so. And maybe we should say, says Rabbi Lau, maybe we should say to couples, you know, that's okay. Develop a stronger marriage first. Get yourself established professionally first, and then go ahead and have children. Yes, Karen.
What if a couple comes and says, we want to get married, but we don't want to have children?
Okay.
What's the party line on that?
There isn't a, well, the party line is roughly that they shouldn't have that attitude. Now, as a rabbi, you know, I don't generally tell people you shouldn't have that attitude. Right? That's not likely to be very, shall we say, fruitful. I would say, let's talk about that a little bit. Because, you know, most young couples do want to have children. Just, you know, I'm curious. Share with me. You know, now there may be very valid reasons why a couple doesn't want to have children. You know? So, but I have to be willing to listen and to explore that, and not just to say, well, the party line is different from that.
I mean, I'm kidding when I say party line, but when you say
No,
that,
I understand, but certainly in the Orthodox world, there is a party line. And, you know, it may vary a little bit depending on who the rabbi is and, you know, what camp they belong to. And I'm part of a different party. So
and what if it, I mean, what is a quote unquote valid reason? How do you decide what would be valid?
person says to me,
Well, I mean, what if they say, you know, we really want to focus on our profession. You know, we're just not, we never were that interested in having kids, or it's just not that important to me. Or, you know, or maybe my childhood wasn't that great, and I don't think
Right.
we'd be
yeah,
great
okay,
parents,
so
whatever.
now, yeah. So you've already listed several possible reasons there, right? if someone tells me, I wasn't really raised very well and my mental health is kind of tenuous, and I don't know that I have the skills to be a good parent. Well, a lot of people have those fears. So again, that's something to explore with people, because it may be just that their assumption has been that because they weren't parented well and they don't have the skills that they shouldn't have children. That's not always true, right? Again, it's a realm for discussion as far as I'm concerned. Yes, Ronnie. Unmute yourself, Ronnie. I'm going to get you that t-shirt.
I know. I think one valid reason for not having children would be genetics. That if something runs in your family, Huntington's disease or something where you'll be putting a child in jeopardy. I think that would be a reason not to have children.
Yes. And then, so I would say that's very reasonable. You don't want to bring a child into the world with Tay-Sachs, for instance.
Right.
Right? And I would say to them, have you discussed what it would be like to adopt a child? Right? So that's a whole different realm for discussion. Some people will come back and say, well, I just don't feel like I could raise another person's child. Right? And other people would say, well, yeah, I want to have children, and, I don't know, can Jewish people adopt? And I would say, well, yeah, talk to Jewish Family Service, and you'll find out how many people have been there before you.
Sometimes I just don't want to is a perfectly good answer to a lot of questions. So.
Well, it may be the most honest answer, but it's also worth asking. And I say this as a rabbi, it's worth asking, what does that mean? That I just don't want to. Yeah, Karen.
In the sort of ultra Orthodox, Haredi, whatever, if
Yes.
someone were to come and say what I said before, are you thrown out of the Orthodox community? Or if you decide not to have children, I mean, if you're physically able to, but you decide not to, is that just completely unacceptable?
It's a barrier, and let's say that you grow up in the Haredi community and you decide for whatever reason, and to you and me, it might be a very good reason,
Mhm.
that you don't want to have a child.
Right.
Right? Okay. You want to
And your
get
hus- and
married,
your
but you
husband
don't
is
want to
fine
have a
with it.
child. Well, guess what? A shidduch in the Haredi world is based on the presumption that you're going to have children. Right?
So
it would
wouldn't-
be very difficult for such a woman to find a shidduch with somebody who was willing not to have children.
Uh-huh. And what about in other Orthodox communities? Are there others that would say, or were you?
It would be a challenge, I think, to find somebody, not impossible. The Orthodox world is not monolithic anymore. Right? Certainly not outside of the Haredi world.
But I guess assuming someone found somebody, man and woman both agreed.
Oh, yeah, you find somebody and you both agree on things, you get a rabbi and they marry you.
Well, I was just curious, how the community responds to it. That's all. If you were
the community response would probably not be positive. You and I might say, well, it's not our business, right? But recognize that as a Jewish community, we're not very good at minding our own business, because the business of the Jewish people is our business. Yes, Lou?
I don't want to jump into this now if we're going to get into it later, and I'm not sure I want to jump into it all, but let me raise the question. In this segment, are we going to discuss women who decide they're not getting married and who want to have children?
That is not on the agenda for this unit, but it's deserving of discussion. It's, and I would say, there are definitely ways that are consistent with the tradition that even the Orthodox world is comfortable with. So that's my short answer to it. Okay.
And then you've got women that don't marry.
And then you have women who, for whatever reason, simply don't marry.
Or men. I mean, yeah.
Yes. And then
Not
what?
men, it's and men.
Yeah. The men. All right. Let's go on to our next text. And this is from a young Israeli rabbi, Yitzchak Avi Rones, on the postponement of fulfilling the mitzvah of Pru Urvu. And here he finds support for the use of contraception in marriage. Okay? In at least in part in response to financial distress. Right? He's going to quote a verse, and I need to give you the whole context of the verse as it appears in the Talmud. Right? There's this verse in the Torah in Deuteronomy that talks about building a house and planting a vineyard, right? And then you marry a wife. In other words, you lay the groundwork to be able to support a family, and then you marry and you have children, right? And so the Talmud says that's derech eretz. That's kind of like life instruction. We should accept that this is part of the order of things, that we prepare, as he puts it here, a firm financial base before marriage, but it's vague. Right? Doesn't convey a clear notion in regard to the size of the home or the size and quality of the vineyard. Yet the rabbi's directive here is that no matter what minimal lifestyle one deems necessary for oneself, appropriate steps must be taken to ensure that this standard of living be maintained as one's family and expenses grow, for otherwise domestic strife will surely follow. Far from being some sort of foreign Western notion, a young couple's financial considerations and concerns are fully in accord with the Torah's understanding of the ideal way to set up a household. Okay? So it says, you want to wait to have children until you are financially secure. That makes sense. And that's acceptable. All right? Go ahead, build a house, plant a vineyard, lay the groundwork financially. But you don't have to wait to get married in order to do that. Okay? Now, the other thing that this plays into is what's happening right now with the cost of Jewish life. Right? If you want to send a child to day school, and I did that, we did that with our children, and I strongly recommend it. Right? If you want to send your children to Jewish camps, summer camps. We did that too. And I definitely strongly recommend that. Right? If you want to, provide the groundwork that enables children to have a very strong, well-educated, secure Jewish identity in this time, right? Those things are expensive. I promise you, they're expensive. And even families that have, a very nice income find it daunting at times to, how they're going to manage to provide all that for their children. Okay? So the cost of raising Jewish children also impacts our reproductive decisions. Okay? Now, would I rather have 4 Jewish children and maybe not send them all to day school? Or would I rather have 3 children and feel like I can probably stretch and provide everything I think that I should provide for their Jewish education and identity? And by the way, all of this, I understand totally that none of those things are a magic bullet, right? Day school and Jewish camps and youth group, right? Some of those things are important for one kid and some for another. And sometimes, nothing helps. But at least you have to be committed to try. Yes, Daniel.
This is a real sore point on my part. We had three daughters. All 3 went to day school at least 6 years, and they all went to camp forever. There is no way, we were very, very middle class. There is no way that my children, or that anybody's children, I should say, with anything close to the same lifestyle can begin to have that dream today. It is so expensive that people are just choosing to not do it. And that is long-term a tragedy. I mean, we're talking about, not reproducing, or some people choosing not to, or whatever. That's nothing like what's happening economically to the cost of camp and daycare, or to camp and day school. And
Yes.
I don't think people realize how difficult it is to become.
Well, once you start having to pay for it, once you start having those children, you do realize it. You find it very, very quickly. Right?
Well, the cost of doing those things would have exceed some people's total income.
Correct.
I mean, if they don't eat and they don't have a house and they don't do anything else, they might be able to spend their entire income on those 2 things.
Right.
And that's not an exaggeration.
No, it's not. I've been there and I understand that. Yes, Steve.
There are a lot of scholarship funds for people who prioritize it. It's not easy. A lot of people don't want to go before a scholarship committee. They don't want to supply whatever it is. So it's not a be all add all. But I can tell, like Camping Korea now, their numbers, they've never had as high numbers before. The enrollment there, and they have a lot of scholarship money, but it's a challenge. I'm not going to say it's not it's a huge challenge, but for families that are committed, there's ways to try it, not for everyone, but for a lot of them, they can still find a way.
If you make $80,000 a year, you're not going to afford whatever it is now, 45, 50,000 a year for iWeaner. You're not going to be able to do it, not for 2 kids. I mean, it has gotten Stephen so in the extreme. I would like to agree with you, and I've heard that argument before. But when you talk to people who actually live this, it's just not the case. 80,000, 100,000 is a common income for our people in our own community at Beth Yeshurun. They can't go to, now, Beth Yeshurun, by the way, someone, I don't know how it happened, but they've made day school affordable, but it was, an extremely huge contribution. And I don't know how sustainable that is.
Yeah.
It's not just difficult, it's impossible.
Kara,
And that is just the way it is.
Carolyn or David, you have a hand up.
Yeah, I think the other point is there may be scholarships available should things be priced in such a way that mere mortals all, and some very well endowed, have to ask for it, because that in itself can bring on a hesitation to do it. I speak from some personal experience there.
Yeah. Yeah. So that is not a problem we are going to solve today, nor is it our goal to do so. But certainly just to note that figures into decisions that we have about Jewish families. Yes, Ronnie.
I want to comment on what Daniel said. And we were always in the position that we were too rich to be poor and too poor to be rich. So we fell into sort of a gray area. And for many years, we basically were tuition poor. That's how we lived our life. All our money went for tuition, Jewish camp, all those things. And it wasn't until really, I don't know, about 12, 15 years, no longer than that, till the kids were out of college. I mean, we were tuition poor. That's how we lived. Because we decided that was a sacrifice we were willing to make.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to have to come to a stopping point here. We'll pick up with this unit again next week, and hope to see you all then. Thanks very much.
Can you get
Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thank
Can you
you.
get Jennifer's phone number?
Good class today. Thank you.
Have a very good week.
Can I get Jennifer's phone number?
Hey, Ronnie, you sure can.
Okay, my husband's gonna write it down. Okay.
Okay. You ready?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you my cell phone number. It's 713
Uh-huh.
502
Uh-huh.
3468.
When is a good time to contact you?
Call me tomorrow at the office, and I'm going to be out of the office probably between like 10:30 and 11:30, but either before or after that, I'll send you a Zoom link and we'll just kind of work through it and figure out what's happening.
Okay,
We'll
that's
be on the
great.
phone and we'll try to get on Zoom and we'll just see if we can work it out.
Thank you so much. I
Yeah,
appreciate
sure.
it.
No problem. That's the easiest way to figure it out is we'll just do that.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Then I'll talk to you more tomorrow.
Bye.